Welcome to our How to Remove a 13B from an FD RX7 episode. For those of you who watched our shop tour video, you'll know that we picked up this FD RX7 with a blown motor, not meaning supercharged, meaning non-functioning. And today we are going to pull this non-functioning engine out of here because we're going to rebuild it, as you should. No, we're not going to swap a V8 in there. No, we're not going to K-swap it. We're going to put this 13B right back in the hole. We did initially think about maybe putting a 20B in it, but when you start to do the math on that, it's a scary number. Like, just the engine is 10 grand, and then to rebuild it, you're probably into another 10 grand. So a lot more cost effective to rebuild this engine. And that will be coming soonish. I think it's probably a couple of months out before you see that engine build series that we are doing with our buddy Joe Ferguson here from RPM Motorsports in partnership with Valvoline. So this is really to prepare for that engine build series. And then of course we'll build the whole car after that. Starting off by removing the factory strut tower bar here. And
is that color factory? Red?
I think this is the factory strut bar. You FD experts will know better than me, but yeah, I'm pretty sure this is a standard bar, although it's rubbing. So a factory bar shouldn't do that. I don't know, maybe I'm mistaken, but I'm 99% sure this is a factory bar, but let us know in the comment section. We're already being exposed as FD newbies here. So, by the way, we should mention the intake was in the trunk, but we were wondering if this was like the factory housing or not, but Pete noticed it's got this M's logo on here. So we're thinking this is a M Sports like aftermarket housing. It's a nice cast piece, so we may end up reusing that.
Look how tiny the intake tubes are though.
Yeah, aren't they? That is really small diameter. It's kind of amazing that that will feed this twin turbo motor. I think we've got everything unbolted for the intercooler here, which, as I said, it is a tiny little unit.
Yeah, wow.
It's like the size of an oil cooler, and not even the right size for a rotary oil cooler. This thing is tiny. And it's worth looking at the duct here too, because somebody has done a patch here with Robertson carpentry screws. It's always a good sign. You know you've bought a sweet machine when it comes with woodworking screws.
At least they patched it, you know?
Yeah, they did, yes. And it actually is functional, but...
I want to know what is up with the secondary...
Yeah, like this overflow tank?
Overflow tank, or yeah, I'm not sure what the
swirl pot?
Swirl
maybe?
pot, yeah.
Yeah. All the FD guys run them, and to be honest, I'm not sure why this
Are these hard to bleed?
Maybe that's what it is, or maybe they tend to like froth or aerate or something. I'm not sure. So you FD guys, let us know why is this on here? Just stripping some more stuff off the top of the motor here before we go up in the air, and it's curious to me why so many guys swap out to like the Goretti style intake elbow here. I'm assuming this one is considered restrictive at a certain power level, and that's why everyone does it. I don't know at what power level guys get rid of this, so yeah, it's kind of nice that it's made of a plastic.
Yeah, it's plastic,
like it
so
won't heat
I don't know.
As much.
Maybe
Everyone
they
seems
crack?
to go to like the aluminum, or maybe they crack. I suspect it's a restriction thing. So again, let us know in the comments, guys. We appreciate a free FD education here. And you've got the world's smallest bypass valve here. There's two of them here. Look at how tiny those little guys are. I'm kind of amazed how delicate and small all the turbo side stuff is, but
what I noticed here, DP, is every clamp has been tightened to 1,000,000 foot-pounds, so they're like all over tightened.
Tearing into the hose, that's always a good, and yet it's still loose even though it's tearing into the hose. So yeah, there's lots of stuff to take off. It's not gonna go back on anyway, but it's entertaining to see. Oh, one last little sweet piece here. Look at this quick release cap on here. The plastic's just been completely rotted out. It's not all bad news with this car though. One of the selling features for us was the fact that it came with this 99 spec front bumper, which is a very desirable piece and an expensive one at that. So, and I really like the blue. The black paint is in rough shape. This blue actually needs to be resprayed too, but if we were gonna paint it, I'd be tempted to paint it this blue color. Although I think maybe we're gonna do something a little different with the color. So stay tuned for that. Lots of teasers in this episode, I know. So we're gonna pull this off right now just so we don't accidentally whack it with the motor and the trans when we're pulling it out, because rare, expensive piece. Draining the oil out of this thing, and not surprisingly, it is black. Not a lot of maintenance has been done here. I guess with a blown motor, you can expect that. Cool thing about these FDs is they do have the twin oil cooler setups. At least I think on the R1 versions. We think this is an R1 spec, don't we?
Yeah, I think so.
I know with the RX8s, they had some models with a single cooler and some with dual coolers. I don't know my FDs that well, so I'm not sure what variations go on, but nicely integrated ducting into it, although like a lot of things on this car, it's not secured very well. Nice that they have this like leaned back rad setup. not sure if we're going to go V-mount on this car or not. There's a lot of different ways you can go on the rad and intercooler mounting on this car, so we still have some time to figure that out. Other than that, I mean, underneath it's actually pretty clean, isn't it, Pete? This is not a rusty car, as you'd expect with a JDM car. They don't seem to be nearly as rusty as Canadian cars. It's interesting looking under here a little bit further and admiring this ancient, I think, EGR system that they have here. Obviously, it's been like capped off or disconnected on this end, but it circulates around through the mid pipe and then through the chassis with some wiring here. So I'm assuming this is some sort of, you know, 90...
OEM though? Was this like a 3-inch downpipe from the OEM or mid pipe or whatever you want to call it?
No, but obviously whoever engineered it, maybe HKS, since the muffler is HKS, integrated all these brackets and stuff for, I think, maybe heat shields and whatnot, and they wanted to keep the emission system intact. I guess, maybe, I don't know. I mean, again, you guys let us know if you know what's going on under here, but it's also leaking from everywhere. Like the tranny bolt hole's leaking, the turbo's leaking oil. There's a ton of oil on the subframe and the whole underside.
I mean, isn't that par for every Rotary?
I guess maybe it is, and it did rust-proof the car for us, so there is that about it. Just pulling out this ancient and decrepit radiator. Look at this thing. The neck here is completely broken. This car was in a light front-end collision, so that might have been what finished the rad off, but it's got some sweet kind of tape on here. I don't know what that's about. That might just be leftover from the parts store or something, but she has seen better days. And then really this kind of broken plastic is a perfect argument for why you want to upgrade to a fully aluminum radiator like we'll do. We'll put a coil rad in here because they make a drop-in fit up, you know, a drop-in rad for this chassis, so it'll just fall right into place. Now, obviously, if we go to like a custom V-mount setup, then we'll have to, you know, figure out how to mount the coil rad. But we at least have the option to go with a drop-in setup if we want to. And
what I want to know is, do people run the stock fans, or do they replace these with some like higher end?
Yeah, I was just wondering the same thing. I'm not sure how much air these fans move, so we'll have to do some homework on that setup, won't we? If you guys watched us pull the S2000 engine, you'll recall there's a massive cross member in the engine bay there that's like welded in, and it's super beefy, obviously making the chassis very stiff. On the FD, on the other hand, it's got this tiny little stamped steel cross member here that's held in by 4 tiny 10 mil bolts. So clearly they weren't chasing chassis stiffness in this era quite as much as they were with the S2000. On the other hand, removing this makes it way easier to get the motor out, so I'm not complaining. So we are just digging a little deeper on this side because we want to take the down pipe off. We think it's going to make it easier to get the motor out. So we've removed some of the charge piping, and it gives you a better look at the way the turbos are set up. It's a pretty interesting setup. You've got this like flapper valve or like a throttle plate in here, which I guess is just part of the way that the turbos are staged in. And you can also see the famous rat's nest of vacuum hoses. Like, look at all these vacuum hoses in here.
Sweet mother of God.
Yeah.
That is just crazy.
A lot of that's going to go away on our new setup too. So yeah, the rat's nest is always a fun topic of conversation. Oh wow, that's a super short bolt. Just pulling off the power brace here that runs north to south on the chassis. Already got the drive shaft out, as you can see, but we're going to pull this out of the way just to make it easier to drop the tail end of the transmission down as we're pulling it out with the engine hoist. So we've got the diff supported because the power brace actually mounts to the diff and it mounts to the tranny on the other end. So I'm just going to put this down semi-gently and see if she'll come up. There she goes. There she goes. And I got this little aluminum dog bone here, but that, my friends, is one power brace. Well, the downpipe is a bit of a different story. We've got all the nuts off after considerable amounts of swearing, but we can't get it out. It's sort of jammed up against the steering shaft. So we're gonna, I think, maybe pull it out once we move the motor forward a bit and clear that steering shaft. So it's gonna stay here for now. So I think all we really have left to do is to blast off these 2 engine mount nuts, just a couple of 14 mil here. And I think at that point it's ready to lift out of here, isn't it, Pete? But I still have lots of room at the back.
I can feel I'm putting a lot of tension into it now.
Yeah.
It's like that engine mount does not want to come out. Yeah, there it goes. Yeah, it's hitting on here too.
Pull it this way a bit?
Yeah, if you can try to pull it out. There we go. Okay, yeah, keep coming a little bit more. Okay, we're clearing.
Yeah, clear.
Okay.
Yeah, hold on, I'll just Well, there you have it. She is out, and it actually wasn't that bad, was it, Pete? We were kind of moaning or groaning a bit, but
there's a couple of small little issues, but aside from that, like, it's pretty standard.
I think it is.
Motor pull.
It's a combustion engine with all the usual stuff you got to disconnect to pull it out. It's a rotary, but as far as bolting in and out goes, it really wasn't that different. And being able to remove the brace and a lot of the front end stuff made it quite easy to pull out. So interesting seeing it on the ground here too with this downpipe, which, as we said, was a bit of a devil to get off. What a nice piece this is. Like, look at the design complexity of this.
Yeah.
That is a really nice piece.
Super cool.
We're not sure if this is HKS or not. The muffler section is, but you guys may know who makes this. I'm sure it's not, it's obviously not a factory piece, but it's really nicely done. So this may be for sale on our Instagram account at some point. And then just looking at the turbo setup is really interesting too. It's kind of like super cool 90s tech, isn't it? Like, first of all, the shape of the outlet into the downpipe is really quite unique, and then the way they've got the two turbos sort of like cast into this giant housing here, and it's all driven off these like vacuum actuated.
Yeah, it's like so complicated, and I look at the size of the turbos. Like, no wonder
they're tiny. Yeah,
the intakes are so small because they are tiny. You can see the front one is I think the smaller turbo, and then the rear one's the bigger one.
Yes.
But yeah, it's super cool stuff. Like the epitome of 90s technology, right?
Yeah, and I think it's a staged intake manifold, so it's like when it goes to the second stage on the manifold, it probably goes to the bigger turbo, and then it goes to the secondary injectors. Like, this has 4 injectors in it, 2 primaries, 2 secondaries. All of this has to work in concert. It's a complicated monster, and when you go to a single turbo setup, it does allow you to simplify a lot of this stuff, including whether or not you want to do away with a lot of the rat's nest and stuff like we will be doing. So wow, super cool seeing it on the ground here. I'm excited to blow it up and get into the building phase of this motor. So stay tuned for that. We're going to be a little while before we get to it, but it'll come before the snow flies. We'll give you that guarantee anyway. And then obviously back in the car. So thanks for watching, everyone. I think that's a wrap, isn't it, Pete?
I think it is.
I don't think there's really much else to do other than figure out how to mount this on an engine stand. I seem to recall our buddy Joe Ferguson, the Rotary guru, has like a special mounting adapter to mount this up. It's not like a normal engine for mounting up. So we'll get to all that soon. And in the meantime, send us information in the comment section or on Instagram or on Facebook about all this stuff that we have that we don't really know what we're working with. So we appreciate your expertise, and we look forward to learning more about this motor as we go. For those of you who have stuck around to the end, congratulations, you're about to get a full teaser on our turbo setup. This is a Turblown cast manifold designed specifically for this Borg-Warner EFR 7670 turbo, internally wastegated, and we've sized it to be a really responsive, sort of like mid-power type of setup. So keep in mind, we are building the FD to go head-to-head with the S15, so we don't want to blow it out of the water right out of the gates. We want to make kind of like a nice, reliable 350 to 400 at the wheel sort of area, and we think this turbo is the perfect size for that. And this internally gated setup is going to really simplify the setup. And when you're dealing with rotaries and FDs, I think simpler is better. That was a 19, right? Whoa!